The Distress Signal. Introduction to the rescue mission. Jacob Clark, an ex-Marine turned cargo pilot, navigated his ship through the treacherous asteroid field known as the Ithor Graveyard. A faint distress signal blinked on his console, barely noticeable amidst the static. He couldn't ignore the weak pulse of life detected inside a battered escape pod. Despite the dangerous surroundings, Jacob felt a pang of responsibility. He had to help. The Ithor Graveyard was a notorious region of space, filled with debris from countless battles and accidents over the years. Navigating it required skill and nerves of steel, both of which Jacob possessed in abundance. His ship, a rugged freighter named the Intrepid, was built to withstand the rigors of space travel, but even it had its limits. As Jacob weaved his way through the asteroid field, he thought about the countless lives lost in this region. The distress signal was weak, suggesting that whoever was in that pod had been stranded for some time. He couldn't just leave them to die. Finding the pod, weaving his ship through the tumbling boulders, Jacob approached the pod, which teetered on the edge of a massive asteroid. With skillful maneuvering, he used his ship to stabilize the pod's descent, engaging the tractor beam to bring it into his cargo bay. The pod's hull was severely damaged, and it looked like it could crack open at any moment. Inside the cockpit of the Intrepid, Jacob monitored the tractor beam's progress on his control panel. Sweat trickled down his brow as he adjusted the ship's thrusters, carefully avoiding the larger asteroids that threatened to collide with his vessel. He couldn't afford any mistakes. The pod finally came to rest inside the cargo bay, and Jacob released a sigh of relief. He quickly made his way to the bay, eager to see who or what he had rescued. Meeting Pollock. Inside the pod, a young Ithorian girl named Pollock cowered behind makeshift barricades, clutching a piece of sharp metal for protection. She was clearly terrified, her large eyes filled with fear as Jacob pried open the hatch. "Easy there," he said softly, holding out a nutrient bar. Pollock snatched it, devouring it quickly while still eyeing him with distrust. Pollock's appearance was alarming. Her skin was pale, and her clothes were tattered. She had clearly been through a lot. Jacob could see the fear in her eyes, and knew that she had been through a traumatic experience. "You're safe now," Jacob said gently. "I'm not going to hurt you." Pollock didn't respond verbally, but she didn't attack him either, which Jacob took as a good sign. He needed to find out more about her situation, but first, he had to ensure she was safe and comfortable. Understanding the situation, when Jacob attempted to access the pod's data logs, Pollock became hysterical, begging through the translator not to be taken back to Ithor. It became evident that she had endured something horrific. Jacob's heart ached as he realized her own people had abandoned her to die. He decided to take her to a human doctor, knowing she needed medical help and safety. Jacob's mind raced as he processed the information. Pollock's distress was genuine, and her fear of returning to Ithor suggested that something terrible had happened there. He couldn't ignore her plight. "All right, Pollock," Jacob said, kneeling beside her. "We're not going back to Ithor. We're going to find you a safe place, and we'll get you the help you need." Pollock's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded weakly. Jacob's resolve to protect her strengthened. He couldn't turn his back on her now. Setting a course for safety, Jacob plotted a course away from Ithorian space, determined to protect Pollock and uncover the truth behind her situation. As they sped through the stars, he couldn't shake the feeling that they had become fugitives. Humanity had always sheltered the oppressed, but Jacob wondered how far they would go to protect one alien girl. As the Intrepid sped away from the Ithor Graveyard, Jacob contacted an old friend, Dr. Elena Sani, who ran a clinic on the Arcturian Vagrant, a massive space station carved into an asteroid. He knew that Elena could provide the medical care Pollock needed, and that the Vagrant's bustling environment might offer some anonymity. "Elena, it's Jacob," he said over the comm. "I have a situation. I need your help." "Jacob, it's been a while," Elena replied, her voice warm despite the static. "What's going on?" "I've picked up a young Ithorian girl. She's in bad shape, and she's terrified of going back to her home planet. I think something terrible happened to her." There was a brief pause before Elena responded. "Bring her to the Vagrant. I'll make sure she's taken care of. And Jacob, be careful. If she's running from something, it might follow you." "I know," Jacob said grimly. "We'll be there soon." As he piloted the Intrepid toward the Arcturian Vagrant, Jacob kept a close eye on the sensors, watching for any signs of pursuit. He knew that if Pollak's fears were justified, they might be in more danger than he initially realized. A safe haven. Arrival at Arcturian Vagrant. Jacob guided Pollak through the bustling corridors of the Arcturian Vagrant, a massive space station carved into an asteroid. It was a nexus for miners, merchants, and vagabonds. They headed for a free clinic hidden in a forgotten corner of the station. The doctor, an older woman named Dr. Elena Sani, recognized Pollak immediately and hustled them into a private room. The Vagrant was a hive of activity, with people from all walks of life going about their business. The station's architecture was a patchwork of different styles and materials, reflecting its diverse population. Jacob moved quickly, keeping Pollak close to avoid drawing attention. As they entered the clinic, Elena greeted them with a mixture of relief and concern. "Jacob, it's good to see you. And this must be Pollak." Pollak clung to Jacob's arm, her eyes wide with fear. Elena's gentle demeanor seemed to calm her slightly, but she was still on edge. "Let's get her checked out," Elena said, leading them to a private exam room. "We need to make sure she's okay." Learning Pollak's story, Dr. Elena Sani explained that Pollak came from a wealthy Ithorian family embroiled in a series of mysterious deaths. Pollak was the sole survivor of an attack that wiped out her family a month ago. The extended family, likely responsible for the deaths, now sought to eliminate her to secure their wealth and power. They had deep ties with the Ithorian government, making it impossible to go to the authorities. As Elena examined Pollak, she shared more details about the girl's background. Pollak's family was one of the most influential on Ithor. They had connections in politics, business, and the military. But recently, there have been a series of deaths that seemed too convenient to be accidents. Jacob listened intently, his concern growing. "So she's been targeted because she's the last remaining heir." "Exactly," Elena confirmed. "The people who want her dead have the resources and influence to cover their tracks. If they find out she's here, they'll come after her." Pollak winced as Elena treated her wounds, but she remained silent. Jacob could see the fear in her eyes and knew that they had to act quickly. Seeking help from an information broker, Dr. Elena Sani suggested they seek help from an information broker named Rix, known for his paranoia and distrust. He only met clients in person at a seedy bar in the worst part of the station. Jacob knew it was risky, but had no other choice. They slipped out of the clinic, blending into the station's labyrinthine corridors. The Rusted Blade was a grimy, dilapidated bar filled with smoke and hard stairs. Jacob ordered a drink and waited, scanning the room for Rix. Finally, a hooded figure motioned him over. Jacob relayed their story, and Rix's eyes narrowed with interest. He agreed to help but warned that it would cost. "The information you need isn't cheap," Rix said, his voice a low rasp. "But I might have something that can help you. Give me a few hours to gather what I can." Jacob nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. They needed information to stay one step ahead of Pollak's pursuers, ambush and escape. Before they could discuss further, the bar exploded in chaos. Ithorian mercenaries stormed in, weapons drawn. They demanded Pollak, but Jacob refused. A firefight erupted, and Jacob used the confusion to escape, dragging Pollak through a narrow maintenance shaft. They tumbled into the station's lower levels, barely escaping with their lives. Pollak was terrified but alive. Jacob's heart pounded as he led Pollak through the maze of tunnels. He could hear the mercenaries shouting behind them, their footsteps echoing in the confined space. "Keep moving," he urged Pollak, who was struggling to keep up. "We can't let them catch us." They rounded a corner and found themselves in a dimly lit corridor, the walls lined with rusted pipes and flickering lights. Jacob spotted a door marked Maintenance and quickly forced it open, pulling Pollock inside. They found themselves in a small room filled with tools and machinery. Jacob barricaded the door with a heavy workbench, hoping it would buy them some time. "We need to find a way out of here," Jacob said, catching his breath. "We can't stay hidden forever." Pollock nodded, her eyes wide with fear. Jacob could see the determination in her gaze, and he knew that she was stronger than she appeared. Finding a hidden sanctuary, navigating the dark corridors, Jacob and Pollock found an old, abandoned part of the station. They discovered a small room that seemed to have been used as a storage area. Jacob fortified the entrance and set up a temporary camp. Pollock finally began to relax, her eyes slowly losing the haunted look they had carried since he found her. As they settled into their makeshift shelter, Jacob took a moment to assess their situation. They were safe for now, but the threat of discovery was ever present. "We'll rest here for a bit," Jacob said, handing Pollock a blanket. "But we need to figure out our next move. We can't stay here forever." Pollock nodded, her expression resolute. Jacob could see the spark of determination in her eyes, and it gave him hope. They would find a way to survive and protect each other, no matter what it took. Uncovering the conspiracy. The truth about Ithor. Dr. Elena Sani managed to send a message to Jacob, detailing the extent of the conspiracy. The Ithorian family's deaths were orchestrated by a powerful syndicate called the Shadow Collective. Pollock's survival threatened their control, and they would stop at nothing to eliminate her. Jacob read Elena's message with a growing sense of dread. The Shadow Collective was a ruthless organization known for its influence and reach. If they were involved, it meant that Pollock was in even more danger than he had initially realized. "We're up against some serious enemies," Jacob said, showing Pollock the message. "But we can't let them win. We need to find a way to expose them and keep you safe." Pollock's eyes widened as she read the message, but she didn't back down. "We'll fight them," she said firmly. "We'll find a way." Jacob felt a surge of pride at Pollock's determination. They were in this together, and he knew that they would find a way to overcome the odds. Meeting with Rix. Jacob decided to take another risk and meet with Rix again. This time, he arranged the meeting in a different part of the station, hoping to avoid another ambush. Rix provided crucial information about the Shadow Collective's operations and revealed that they were using advanced genetic experiments to maintain their power. "You need to find out what they're planning," Rix said, handing Jacob a data chip. "This contains everything I've managed to gather. Use it wisely." Jacob thanked Rix and left the meeting with renewed determination. They had a lead, and it was time to follow it. Infiltrating the collective's operations. Using the information from Rix, Jacob and Pollock infiltrated one of the Shadow Collective's research facilities. It was heavily guarded, but Jacob's military training proved invaluable. They discovered that the collective was experimenting with genetic enhancements, using kidnapped children as test subjects. The facility was a maze of sterile corridors and high-tech labs. Jacob and Pollock moved cautiously, avoiding security patrols and cameras. They found a lab filled with cages, each containing a child who had been subjected to horrific experiments. Pollock's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the children. "We have to save them," she whispered. Jacob nodded, his heart heavy with anger and determination. "We will. But we need to gather evidence first." They managed to download critical data from the facility's mainframe, exposing the collective's experiments. But just as they were about to leave, they were discovered. An alarm blared, and guards swarmed the facility. A desperate escape. Jacob and Pollock fought their way out, rescuing as many children as they could. The firefight was intense, and Jacob was injured, but they managed to escape into the depths of the station. The rescued children were terrified but grateful. As they made their way through the station's lower levels, Jacob contacted Elena, asking for her help. "We need a safe place for these kids," he said, wincing as he pressed a hand to his bleeding side. "Can you help us?" "Bring them to the clinic," Elena replied. "I'll make sure they're taken care of." Jacob and Pollock led the children to the clinic, where Elena and her team quickly set to work, treating their injuries and providing comfort. Jacob's injuries were also tended to, and he finally allowed himself to relax, knowing that they had made a difference. Planning the next move. Back at the clinic, they regrouped and planned their next move. The data they had gathered was damning, but they needed a way to get it to the right people. Jacob contacted an old friend in the Galactic Council, hoping to use his connections to expose the Shadow Collective. "We have the evidence we need," Jacob said, showing the data to Pollock. "Now we just need to get it to someone who can do something about it." Pollock looked at the data, her expression determined. "We'll find a way. We have to." Jacob felt a sense of hope. They had come this far, and he knew that they could see it through to the end. They would expose the Shadow Collective and ensure that Pollock and the other children could live in safety. The fight for justice. Contacting the Galactic Council, Jacob's old friend, Ambassador Thane, agreed to meet them discreetly. They arranged a rendezvous on a neutral space station, where Jacob presented the evidence. Thane was shocked by the extent of the conspiracy and promised to take immediate action. Thane was a seasoned diplomat, known for his integrity and commitment to justice. As he reviewed the data, his expression grew increasingly grim. "This is worse than I imagined," Thane said, looking up at Jacob and Pollock. "The Shadow Collective has been operating with impunity for far too long. We need to bring this to the Council immediately." Jacob felt a surge of relief. With Thane's help, they had a real chance of exposing the collective and bringing its members to justice. Exposing the Shadow Collective. Ambassador Thane called an emergency session of the Galactic Council. The evidence was presented, and the council members were appalled. They voted unanimously to take action against the Shadow Collective. Arrest warrants were issued, and operations were launched to dismantle the organization. The council session was tense, with heated debates and accusations flying. But Thane's presentation of the evidence left no room for doubt. The collective's crimes were laid bare for all to see. As the session concluded, Thane approached Jacob and Pollock. "You've done a great service to the galaxy," he said. "We'll do everything in our power to ensure that the collective is brought to justice." Pollock smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. "Thank you," she said quietly. The collective strikes back. The Shadow Collective did not go down without a fight. They launched a series of retaliatory attacks, targeting key figures in the council and those who had aided in their exposure. Jacob and Pollock found themselves in constant danger, always on the move to stay ahead of the collective's assassins. The attacks were relentless, with explosions and firefights becoming a daily occurrence. Jacob and Pollock had to rely on their wits and each other to survive. "We can't keep running forever," Jacob said during a rare moment of respite. "We need to find a way to strike back." Pollock nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "We'll find a way," she said. Together, forming alliances, Jacob and Pollock began reaching out to other victims of the Shadow Collective, forming alliances and building a network of resistance. They received support from various factions across the galaxy, all united in their desire to see the collective destroyed. The network grew rapidly, with new members joining every day. Jacob and Pollock worked tirelessly to coordinate efforts and plan their next moves. "We're not alone," Jacob said one night, looking at the growing list of allies. "We have the strength to fight back." Pollock smiled. "And we'll win," she said confidently. A new base of operations. With the help of their new allies, Jacob and Pollock established a hidden base of operations on a remote moon. From there, they coordinated attacks on the Shadow Collective, striking at their supply lines and disrupting their operations. The base was a hive of activity, with people coming and going at all hours. Jacob and Pollock worked side by side, planning missions and gathering intelligence. "We're making progress," Jacob said one day, looking at the latest reports. The collective is starting to feel the pressure. Pollock nodded. We won't stop until they're gone, she said firmly. A personal loss. During one of the missions, Jacob's old friend Elena was killed. Her death was a devastating blow, but it also galvanized the resistance. They became even more determined to bring down the Shadow Collective, fighting not just for justice, but for the memory of those they had lost. Elena's death hit Jacob hard. She had been a trusted friend and ally, and her loss left a void that couldn't be filled. We'll make them pay, Jacob vowed, his voice choked with emotion. For Elena and for everyone they've hurt. Pollock placed a hand on his shoulder. We'll do it together, she said softly. The final battle, gathering the forces. The resistance grew stronger with each passing day. Jacob and Pollock coordinated with their allies, planning a final assault on the Shadow Collective's main stronghold. It was a risky plan, but it was their best chance to end the threat once and for all. The preparations were intense, with everyone working tirelessly to ensure that everything was in place. Jacob and Pollock spent long hours reviewing strategies and coordinating with their allies. This is it, Jacob said, looking at the assembled forces. Our chance to bring them down. Pollock nodded, her eyes filled with determination. We'll make it count, she said. The infiltration. The final assault began with a daring infiltration. Jacob, Pollock, and a small team of elite operatives snuck into the heart of the Shadow Collective's stronghold. The facility was heavily guarded, but they managed to avoid detection using a combination of stealth and cunning. The stronghold was a fortress, with layers of security designed to keep intruders out. But Jacob and his team were prepared. They moved silently, taking out guards and disabling security systems as they went. We're almost there, Jacob whispered, glancing at Pollock. Stay close. Pollock nodded, her heart pounding with anticipation. The climactic battle. Once inside, the real battle began. The resistance launched a full-scale attack, drawing the collective's forces away from the infiltrators. Jacob and Pollock fought their way through the facility, determined to reach the control center and shut down the collective's operations for good. The battle was intense, with explosions and gunfire echoing through the halls. Jacob and Pollock moved with precision, their training and determination guiding them through the chaos. We have to keep moving, Jacob urged, leading the way through the maze of corridors. Pollock followed, her resolve unwavering. They were so close, facing the leader. In the heart of the stronghold, they confronted the leader of the Shadow Collective, a ruthless figure known only as the Overseer. The battle was fierce, with Jacob and Pollock using every ounce of their strength and skill. Finally, they managed to defeat the Overseer, ending the Shadow Collective's reign of terror. The Overseer was a formidable opponent, with years of experience and a ruthless determination to match. But Jacob and Pollock fought with a ferocity born of their desire for justice. This ends now, Jacob said, his voice filled with resolve. Pollock nodded, her eyes blazing with determination. For everyone you've hurt, she said, her voice steady, shutting down the operations. With the Overseer defeated, they managed to shut down the collective's operations. The remaining forces surrendered, and the resistance celebrated their hard-won victory. The galaxy was finally free from the Shadow Collective's grip. As they deactivated the final systems, Jacob and Pollock felt a sense of relief wash over them. They had done it. The threat was over. We did it, Jacob said, looking at Pollock with a smile. Pollock smiled back, her eyes filled with tears of joy. We really did, she said softly. Rebuilding and healing. Helping the survivors. With the Shadow Collective dismantled, Jacob and Pollock focused on helping the survivors. They worked tirelessly to provide aid and support to those who had been affected by the collective's actions. Their efforts brought hope and healing to countless lives. The work was exhausting, but it was also deeply rewarding. Jacob and Pollock saw firsthand the difference they were making in people's lives. We're giving them a chance to rebuild, Jacob said, looking at the grateful faces around them. Pollock nodded. "And we're building a better future," she said. Establishing a new order. The Galactic Council, grateful for their efforts, offered Jacob and Pollock positions to help rebuild and maintain peace. They accepted, knowing that their work was far from over. They dedicated themselves to creating a new order, one that would prevent the rise of such a threat again. "We've done so much," Jacob said, raising a glass in a toast. "And there's still more to do." Pollock nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "We'll keep fighting for a better world," she said. Facing new challenges emerged, but Jacob and Pollock faced them with unwavering resolve. They adapted to new threats and continued to protect those in need. Their courage and determination remained a beacon of hope for the galaxy. The challenges were daunting, but Jacob and Pollock faced them head-on, knowing that they had the strength and support of their allies. "We're ready for anything," Jacob said, preparing for another mission. Pollock smiled. "And we'll face it together," she said. "A bright future." As the years passed, Jacob and Pollock's efforts bore fruit. The galaxy became a safer, more just place. Their legacy of hope, strength, and resilience continued to inspire future generations. They had built a future worth fighting for, and they knew that their mission would continue long after they were gone. The future was bright, filled with endless possibilities. Jacob and Pollock looked out at the galaxy they had helped to shape, their hearts filled with pride and hope. "We've come so far," Jacob said, taking Pollock's hand. "And there's still so much more to do." Pollock nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "Together, we'll keep building a better world," she said. A new beginning. Jacob and Pollock stood on the balcony of their home, looking out at the peaceful landscape. They had come a long way from the chaos and danger of their past. They had found a new beginning, and they were ready to face whatever the future held. The sun set on the horizon, casting a warm glow over their home. Jacob and Pollock stood side by side, their hearts filled with hope and determination. "This is just the beginning," Jacob said, his voice filled with resolve. Pollock smiled, her eyes shining with hope. "And we'll face it together," she said. The end of one journey marked the beginning of another. Jacob and Pollock knew that their mission was far from over, but they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they would continue to fight for justice and protect those in need, leaving a legacy of hope and strength that would endure for generations to come.